Welcome to the series of Relational Database Management System. Myself is Fatima Rafiq, Assistant Professor, BCA Department, Avedan Amda Senior College. We have already started with the unit number 5, that is crash recovery. We have seen what is a failure classification, what is recovery, the recovery methods, that is deferred and immediate update recovery method. Today we will be looking into one example how to recover the system whenever the system is crash by using the immediate update method and by using the deferred update method. Here these are some entries by a system before the system goes crash. If the immediate update with the checkpoint is used, what will be the recovery procedure? For understanding better, we will draw one diagram. This is a diagram like this, where we show the transaction which is already started and the transaction which is completed. Every entry will be present over here. So because here see the transaction starts its execution, it read the data item A, data item D, it write on the data item D, and then it commit. So here we have transaction T1, transaction T2. We have one entry which is a checkpoint entry, because after commit we have a checkpoint. We know that whenever there is a checkpoint, it means that the effect which is the instruction which is executed before the checkpoint is actually gets stored on the secondary device permanently. Then we have an entry of a start transaction T2. Transaction T2 reads the data item B. It writes the data item B. Then it write the data item B. Then before commit operation, it starts the third transaction. Transaction T3 read the data item C, and then the commit of transaction T2 perform. Like the transaction which is performed here in the T2 transaction, which is a reading and writing, will be done, and these are permanently get stored on the secondary device. Now the transaction T3 continues its execution, and then the system gets crash for this particular time. If the immediate update recovery method is used, what will be the recovery procedure? See, immediate update recovery method is a recovery method where the write operation is actually executed at the same time. It does not pay attention whether the transaction is committed or not committed, but it do all the effects, all the changes of write operation on the data item when the data item is actually in the execution. This is the diagram which is showing the execution of T1, which is having this like checkpoint T2 transaction, and then this particular time is the transaction where the transaction is failed. Now check the committed transaction since the last checkpoint and list out the active transaction where the system is in crash. We know that whenever we have a transactions, the transaction is either committed transaction or these are the uncommitted transactions. So we need to identify what are the active transactions which are not executed, which the commit operation. Undo all the write operation of the active transaction. Now what we need to do, we need to identify first the list of active transactions. Here we have actually three transactions. We have transaction number T1, T2 and T3. If we see the transaction T1 is started and committed successfully, transaction T2 it starts, then T3 at the same time start, but after some time T2 has a committed transaction entry, and then the T3 is in execution and it got failed. So first we will identify all the active transactions. So here the active transaction only is the T3 transaction, because T2 and T1 is already committed transaction. Step number 2 is undo all the write operation of the active transactions. So what are the active transactions here? Only the T3 transactions. So we will, whenever we are having a write operation, we just need to undo it. And then step number 3 is log redo the operation of the committed transaction from the log. So whatever operation which is there in the redo, there which are having a entry as a commit entry. So for that particular transaction, we just need to perform the redo operation. So here in the step number what we need to do here, according to the step number 1, we need to identify all the active transactions. These are the active transaction. Here T3 is only the active transaction. Step number 2, we need to take the write operation and we need to just undo it, which are the write operation if belongs to the active transaction. And then step number 3, we will be identifying the transaction which is the committed transaction, and we need to perform the redo operation. Because it is a immediate update method, so T1 and T2 transaction has to be redone and T3 transaction has to be undone. So this is the recovery procedure by using the immediate update recovery method. Now if we use the deferred update recovery method, and for this particular deferred update technique method, if we consider this example here, we have a transaction T1 which write the data item T1 and then it commit. Then we have a checkpoint entry. Then starting with the transaction T4, we have two write operation, one on the data item B, another in the data item A, and then T4 is also got committed. Then we have started the transaction T2, but it is not committed, and then T3 which is also not committed. So in all, and the system get crash over here, and we are using the deferred update method. For deferred update method, remember that we already seen deferred update method is a method where all the write operation is suspend until the commit operation. So no write operation will get executed until the transaction is committed. So here again we need this type of graph where we have T1 which is executed before the checkpoint, then T4 which is the committed transaction, then T2 and T3 is actually executing, and at that time failure occur. Check committed we will here again we will apply the same strategy as a deferred update as a immediate update recovery method. Here we are having a rule like first we need to identify what are the active transactions. Like here we see for this particular example we will able to understand that T1 transaction and T4 transactions are committed transaction, and T2 and T3 are the transactions which are active transactions. Active transaction in case of the deferred update method does not actually made changes into the databases. The changes are made in the local storage, that is the main memory storage. So here we will apply these step number 1, apply redo operation to all the write operation of committed transaction from the log. Either we will be having a entry which is a T1 start and T1 commit, and we can have an entry only with a T1 start or a TI start. So if you find any entry which is the TI start and TY commit, so for that particular transaction we need to redo it. We need to redo it because its effect is there, and we want these effect to be permanently get stored on the secondary device. But if the transaction is active and it is not committed, it means that we can cancel it because it does not have any effect on the database, because the write operations for the deferred update method, the write operations are suspend until the commit operation. So if we apply these rules here, step number 1 is transaction T1 started and committed before the checkpoint, so no need to consider the T1 for a recovery procedure. Step number 2, transaction T4 started and committed after the checkpoint, so redo all the operation of transaction T4. Here the importance of checkpoint is, if the checkpoint is there, we need not do redo or undo. But for T4, because it is a committed transaction, we need to perform the redo operation. But for the transaction T2 and T3, because it is started but it is not committed, these are the failed transactions, so we just need to ignore them. Why? Because they don't have any effect on the secondary device, so we will ignore the T2 and T3 transactions. So these are the recovery procedures when we are using the deferred update recovery method and immediate update recovery method. I hope this is clear to you. If you find any difficulty or any doubts, write in the comment box. Thank you.